Lifters. Today we're going to be talking about hydraulic flat tappet lifters, why they fail, and what we can do to improve their reliability. So recently, I lost a hydraulic flat tappet lifter in my 351 Cleveland. It was from Comp Cams. It lasted 3 years after breaking in and failed completely unexpectedly. I was running Valvoline VR1 high zinc racing oil, and without any noise or commotion, that lifter started going flat. Presumably it stopped spinning in its bore. And this goes beyond the break-in period. And from what I've discovered, there is definitely very poor quality control in the manufacturing of these parts. If your lifter is ground improperly, it won't spin and it will eat itself on the cam lobe. So after ordering a new camshaft and a set of lifters from Iski, which is a company that I trust, they get their lifters from Johnson, which is a third party, not Iskandarian. So wherever I would get these lifters from, I decided now that it is the best course of action to use a dial indicator to check the dimension of the crown that is supposed to be ground into the lifter. This lifter is Eaton, but there's supposed to be a slight radius on the face of the lifter from 1 to 3 thousandths. And what that does is allows it to spin in the bore, because that crown rides against a slight taper on the cam lobe and promotes it to rotate. And I found all of them had a crown of about 1 thousandth, which is the low end in spec. And I didn't think that would be a problem. However, one of them was ground off center, very clearly ground off center. The crown never came back down on one side. And I thought to myself, that is just not a risk that I'm comfortable taking. That is a manufacturing defect. And I didn't want to just buy another set of new lifters. So what I did is I found new old stock Ford service parts hydraulic flat tappet lifters on eBay. And today we're going to be taking them apart, cleaning them, finding out what makes them tick. Right here is the old lifter that failed. Created a concave indentation on it as it ate itself on the cam lobe. Clearly it stopped rotating in the bore. See, it ate all the way out to that oil hole, and the cam has similar damage on the lobe. I brought the old comp lifters, and measuring these on a dial indicator show all these used lifters have a crown of about less than 1 thou. Some of them are at 1 thou, and this one is a little bit less. Obviously these are used, so their crown in theory could be a little bit less than a new one, but clearly one of them was not good enough. And here are the new old stock lifters, Ford replacement parts. They have quite a different look to them, and today I'm going to be disassembling them, cleaning them, lubricating them with oil, and reassembling them. But first I just wanted to visually look at a few of these differences here, right? They are quite similar in design. The internal componentry of the plunger and spring is slightly different. There is one additional part in the new old stock ones compared to these new comp lifters, or not new, but they were new. Now the new old stock has a larger oiling hole on the side, but lacks this oiling groove along the top of the lifter body. And I'm not sure the purpose of these grooves on the middle of the lifter body. They're not grooved, they're raised along the outside here. But that could be designed in for further oil control. So just for demonstration purposes, we're going to use this parallel and the dial indicator to check the crown on this lifter. I've already checked all of these and they're all in spec, a little over 1 thou, so more crown than the Johnson lifters or the comp. That's exactly 2 thou. You see that? Being closer so you can fully see that. Center this on the center of the face of the lifter. Goes down 2 thousandths, comes back to 0, and then it goes down 2 thousandths on the other side. And we'll spin the lifter so we see that that crown is present in both directions. This lifter has a crown of about 2 thousandths, and if you're doing this, I recommend you verify new, old stock, new manufactured lifters, whatever, just to verify. It is not good enough to trust the manufacturer that these will not fail in your engine. Now, it's also key to do this test in at least 2 directions perpendicular to one another, because that is how I found the manufacturing defect in the Johnson lifters, right? I would do this, and in one direction, it never went back down on that other side. So that's a very important point. The new old stock lifters are very cool though. Come in that tin. Some of them have a little bit of surface rust that we will be removing today. And let's get to that. Okay, we have an open table, and I'm going to be compressing the plunger down with my push rod and removing those retaining clips. These are liable to go flying, which is why I brought the set of the old comp lifters, so I'll be able to reuse those retaining clips. I'm not too proud to admit I've already lost 2 of these in the shop. No hope of ever finding them. Disassemble this and show you the internal parts. The plunger itself is quite hard to remove, or it's a little stuck in there, so sometimes it needs a bit of help. Pull it through. So yeah, there's a spring in the plunger, and on top of that is this part. This is the piece that sits on top of the plunger and presses up against the push rod cup. And this piece, this is completely lacking in the internal parts of a comp lifter, and therefore I'm assuming all of the modern manufactured lifters. Other than that, their assembly's basically identical. See this spring, this small plate. The comp lifters have a virtually identical part under the push rod cup. So these have been in a box for probably around 50 years, and some of them still have some oil in them, but either way, we're just gonna clean them out. First we blow them out with compressed air, and then wash them with some WD-40. So, almost done assembling all these lifters. This one, unfortunately, I lost the round plate that goes in there. It's somewhere here by the bandsaw, but unless I find it, I'm gonna have to make a new one. The round plates that came with the comp lifters are a little too big, and we might turn these down, which would probably be fine. It's sitting between that clip with the spring and the round piece that sits between that clip and the push rod cup. Now, a good reason to disassemble these is because, well, even new lifters, you don't know what's inside them, and it's good to lubricate them and make sure they're clean. And when you do this, going through this physical inspection with your hands and looking at every one of them, you'll pick up on the imperfections. So there's 4 of them with light surface rust, very light. Nothing that's going to be a problem, but I'm going to take these apart and turn them on the lathe to get rid of that. Yeah, this is the small piece that we have to replace. So this one is the one that we're going to start with to get rid of the surface rust, and we're going to be disassembling them all before putting them in the lathe to avoid contaminating the internals with any chips and dirt from that part of the shop. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and chuck this lifter up in the lathe. Careful not to grab it too tight. Jaws. We're going to start out with some very fine jam pad. There's not much to remove here. All right, it's gonna be just fine. So I'm gonna repeat this process for the rest of these lifters, and we'll get back to it. All right, so the new old stock lifters are all assembled in the engine, and I'm back at home, and I've got the Isky lifters from Johnson here, and this is the one that failed the crown test, and I'm going to show you exactly how it failed. Let's get her centered there. Now, I'm going to note that while you might be okay doing it in 2 directions, you want to do as many directions as possible, because that's how I was able to discover the off-center crown on this lifter. You can see here along this line, the lifter's crown goes down by about 3 thousandths there, from 0 at the center. Along this line, the lifter is centered at 0, and it goes down with a crown of about 2.5 thousandths. Comes back up to 0 and stays at 0 all the way to the other side of the lifter. There is no crown, or that is to say this crown is ground off center. You can see in the other direction the crown is behaving relatively the same way without going down. This is a manufacturing flaw of the Johnson lifter, and therefore I'm going to be sending these back. Shout out to Nolan at Iski for being really cool with me and understanding exactly what I was talking about and giving the go-ahead for using the new old stock lifters. Well, all 16 of these lifters are going to be good as new. Cleaned, disassembled, lubricated. 4 of them brushed off some surface rust on the lathe. Okay. Good as new.